Okay, I'm here. Cool. Hello, everyone. This is my first live stream that I'm doing to share an overview on the month ahead. I'm excited to do this. I just want to get a little feedback since this is a new setup for me. If someone who's here doesn't mind just letting me know how is the volume, and I can make some corrections now and then jump in. All right, I'm getting thumbs up. Excellent. Okay. Let me just see how I can share my screen here. There must be a way to share my screen. And if anyone knows, maybe pop out. Does anyone know how to share my screen? This is so cool. I can see everyone right there. Okay. While I'm looking, this whole thing started because I was talking to someone, another father I met, who is a well-known public figure on Stitch. And he's a gamer. And he just like gets on live streams and interacts with people. And I just like, wow, that's how fun. Just to do what you love doing and to get to talk to people in lifetime. Like I'm kind of blown away. I never had this thought before. Okay, so I'm just going to take a solid minute to see if I can share my screen. And if I can't, it's fine. And if one of you are open to Googling that for me too, and then if there's a way, I can just do it at some point. Manage? No. Okay, we'll let it be for now. All right, so I'm just going to take a moment and tune in. Okay. What I want to start by giving attention to are the movements of Saturn. Since I can't share the screen, or I don't know how to, I'm going to look at it and then just really give my best effort to capture the energetics and not worry too much about the specifics. Right now, Saturn's at 0 Pisces. And at the end of this week, Saturn's going to station direct. So first, anytime a planet stations, I always say it's as if it's conjunct itself. And there's a heightened focus on that particular planetary function. If you think about that, it makes a lot of sense. It slows down. So there's a concentration. And the symbology of a planet changing movement, whether from retrograde to direct or direct to retrograde, is a turning around within consciousness. There's something that's shifting now. Generally, the stationing direct of Saturn corresponds to a hyper focus, gravity of awareness dropping more deeply into all things Saturn. What is within my own realm of responsibility? Where am I called to be cultivating the discipleship, self-agency, self-authority? These are all Saturn keywords. What I want to do is really get to the heart of this stationing at 0 degrees Pisces and speak to what is this deeper introspection and self-agency and responsibility that's emerging right now. What's the greater context and cycle? I always think of stationing planets and transits in general, not just in terms of like, this is a transit or Saturn stationing, but seeing it. And I invite everyone to think this way, seeing everything as a part of a larger developmental process. So it's stationing direct. Where is it going to, right? where is it moving towards? What's going to happen within this new cycle? It's as if you're getting in your car. Okay, you're getting in your car, but what's the context of that? Where are you driving? So to look at the larger long-term theme of a stationing or a transit is incredibly insightful and helpful to understand the dynamics emerging. Okay, I see some information here. Click the share screen option in the streaming dashboard. Right, I don't see a streaming dashboard. Oh, pop out dashboard maybe? Maybe I have to click that. Okay, menu, select stream. What's that? No, I don't see it. A pop-up window will come out that allows you to click the screen or app you would like to share. I don't see it. doesn't seem to be there. I see a share button, but that's more like sharing the video. Select stream. No. Nope, not there. Okay, thank you for that information. It might be a different account level or something else. I'll look into it for next time. I appreciate it. So what's interesting is when I began this stream, I noticed that there was an existing title that I created a long time ago, earlier this year. Apparently when I had some other intention to do a live stream that I forgot about. And the title was something like the difference between work and slavery. And I'm like, this is perfect. This is exactly where I want to go. It's like it was already planted several months ago. So I invite you to relax and go on this little journey with me. I'm going to be speaking about the heart of the Saturn stationing direct, its greater context, but I'm going to do this by doing my best to drop into its essence and what I actually feel is in the pulse, is alive, what's real for us right now. So I'm just going to start with this beautiful teaching. This is what I was thinking about. It was probably during the time of Passover. Okay. So when you think about Saturn, we do have this idea called work and discipline. It's the most basic thing because Saturn corresponds to conditioning. So to condition anything in our life requires consistent habit, habituation towards that which we're conditioning. It's not just action, it's within the level of our own thoughts. Right? We have to be thinking in line with whatever it is we're trying to establish. To grow roots means tending that which we're really seeking to stabilize. And this is true for every part of our own life. It's true for our spiritual growth. It's true for the body that we want to try to create. It's really one of the basic levels of self-responsibility and where we learn what we can control relative to Saturn. The habituation of our own thinking. The conditioning that we create. And a big part of the conditioning work within Saturn is really becoming self-aware of the conditioning patterns that are deeply ingrained. Right? A lot of these things are learned, they're established, and this is what's challenging with Saturn in general. It's heightened at Pisces, which I'll speak to in a moment. What's challenging is we have these conditioning patterns, and there's a way in which, okay, we're going to hope or expect or want the world to work out a certain way for us. But it's not going to, because we get in the way of that. Our patterns or habits, our habituations really get in the way of the things that we want or that we tell ourselves that we want. Basic example, someone wants to mold a particular muscular physique. Their habits that are contrary to that cultivation are going to get in the way of that. And it's not the world's fault. And we all have our different structural realities, our unique curriculum templates. But what we're doing with that and the thoughts that we're choosing, the patterns that we're really seeking to establish and habituate in our own life, that's up to each one of us to determine and assert for our own selves. Even though we have different conditions that we're working with, the only people that really grow are those that, in a sense, choose their vibration, choose their thoughts, contrary to the conditioning, contrary to the circumstances of their life. They say, well, I want to grow. I want to develop myself. So we can easily be stuck in a pattern, in a habituated conditioning pattern of thinking, of relating, of being that is contrary to where in our deepest desire we actually want to go. And that's that Saturn taking responsibility for ourselves. The issue with Pisces, in particular, any kind of stationing or strong aspects with Saturn in Pisces is this. Pisces corresponds to, we can say, all that is, and our surrender to all that is, and where we're not different from oneness. We're not separate from oneness. One of the greater challenges and sort of existential points of confusion within the Pisces archetype is, where do I assert my individual will, my individual efforts, versus where do I let go and allow everything to just be as it is? Surrender and allow and trust, but then wait, I'm not where I want to be. Okay, I'm going to try harder, and wait, I'm trying too hard, and I'm repressing, and I'm pushing, and I'm not allowing. One of the teachings with Saturn and Pisces in general is to recognize, without intentional spiritual discipleship, and by spiritual discipleship, this is whatever inspires us, right? Whatever holds ultimate meaning, life isn't going to give it to us. Life isn't going to be meaningful. We're not going to have a spiritual revelation or have a deeper sense of spiritual unity or meaning or purpose with a capital M, with a capital P. Things won't make sense. We won't feel this deeper existential congruency and purpose and peace by just surrendering and doing nothing about it. This is because we're always going to form certain habits, right? Without a quality of discipline and purpose and orientation to discernment, we're not going to get anywhere. No similar than building that muscular body. So Saturn and Pisces, what happens? Well, you just flow with the current. You get into the wave and the flow of the river, and you go wherever it takes you. Well, that can be all kinds of things. So the lack of spiritual discernment or discernment that says, I'm choosing to use my life and my time with higher purpose and meaning. The lack of that means we're going to be unconsciously allowing some kind of non-meaningful purpose to take us over. Because form, Saturn, we're always going to be conditioned. Our consciousness is always going to be conditioned by the habits that we create. And so the lack of discernment and agency and choice with Saturn and Pisces says we're going to fall into something. That's where it can be very easy to say, well, I'm just waking up. I don't have any purpose or direction or intention, no discipline, no discernment. So I can scroll on my phone. I can just eat whatever I want to eat. And, Pisces can also be that escapism. So things feel good, and I'm sort of temporarily escaping or departing from the stress or the separation of life, but I'm not growing. I'm not getting anywhere. So this is a key teaching with Saturn and Pisces. We take responsibility to condition and use our time, space, experience with respect to our deeper spiritual devotion, / with respect to whatever higher meaning we're wanting to experience in life. So that greater reflection point is, what's the purpose of my life? What's meaningful? What makes this life experience meaningful to me? So we're all going to answer that in slightly different ways. But I think at the heart of it, that question takes us to the core of, why are we really here? How can we best use our life? Saturn corresponds to the limitations of everything, including the limitations of our incarnation. We're going to die, the body will decay, and things will end at a certain point. So there's always this gravity of awareness that says, if I don't really take responsibility for what I care about, I'm not going to get where I want to go. So that's a spiritual maturation that's really called upon with Saturn and Pisces. The other side of this, however, is where we become a slave to time and space. So the conditions of our life, Saturn, our responsibilities, our job, our status, the things that we have to do, and even sort of the way it looks good on paper, right? The things that we have that says we made it, we've succeeded. All of that can become an accidental interruption and distraction from what is truly meaningful. Where form and the conditioning and the disciplines that we've established in our life actually becomes a distraction and an obscuring of what's truly meaningful. So then sometimes Saturn in Pisces puts us into this deeply introspective place. What's all of this for? What's the meaning of all of this? So the disillusioning quality of Saturn in Pisces really brings us to the fact that the world on its own is inherently meaningless. There's nothing about our life that says this job or this body or this relationship or this purpose is meaningful on its own. Things can look very good and there can be success on some level of perception, but it can be completely empty on the inside, right? So these extremes of being lost in this form, but this emptiness of form, Saturn and Pisces, it's like, what's the point? Waking up every day, doing all these things. What am I doing it for? What's it for? Versus not defining any kind of boundary, not establishing any kind of discipline in our life, just falling into addictions and patterns and escapism because we're not giving meaning to the form. They're both these two expressions where we are invited to determine for ourselves, Saturn, self-responsibility. We become our own parents. Something that as a child, we really depend on our own parent or the parental energies of our life to help guide us, to help show us the way, to give us correction, to bring us into alignment with love, with compassion, with gentleness, with no shame, so that we can learn to really understand what it's like to live with respect to greater meaning and purpose. We have to become our own adults, and that's a Saturn issue. At a point, we are not adults, and we need to allow ourselves to be modeled. We need to allow ourselves to not know the way and to learn from others that have been here for a while. And at a certain point, we're stretched to say, you're stronger than you realize, you're more capable than you know. Take it upon yourself to figure this out. And yet there's always, at every stage of growth, those who have come before us, the elders, the spiritual teachers. When we look at Saturn and Pisces, we're looking at the timeless universal spiritual teachings, that which we can draw upon that's always been there. What do they say? What did the teachers say? Those who have woken up, those who have managed to use this life to attain greater spiritual meaning and purpose. And this doesn't have to be just awakening, right? What do those who have achieved, the relationship of their dreams or their ideal career, who have actualized their creative avenues in life, right? Anything that inspires and engenders a sense of meaning and purpose, we can look towards those. And they all say the same thing. It didn't just happen on its own. It wasn't like I just woke up one day and everything worked out. Just like you can win the lottery. Most people that win the lottery, what happens? It's quickly that they just lose it all again, because their consciousness had not become conditioned to actually be in relationship with that level of abundance. We always resort back to the patterns that we're familiar with. Same reason why any one of us who have worked with any level of addiction, on any level, be it relational, sexual, substance abuse, it's actually very, very hard to break out of it, right? The breaking out of it is growing roots in a completely different paradigm of thought. One that we practice, one that we repeat, one that we tend to. And I really do want to draw upon the AA teachings, because one of the most beautiful things that I respect from that community is this idea that in order to maintain our sobriety, we have to share it with others. Big part of that community, and I think a lot of spiritual paradigms, is this idea of service. Living a life where it's not just about you figuring it out. Sharing what you've learned in order to really learn it. Helping other people. And this is where the deepest meaning and purpose in our life is never just about something that we're attaining and figuring out on our own. We practice it, we cultivate. It doesn't happen on its own. But a deeper dimension of that cultivation is fundamentally, and we all will relate to this in a different way. I'm here to be helpful. My life is here to be inspiring or purposeful or meaningful in some essentially good way. And so we know that which we're dreaming of, that which we want, we can feel that this also is of benefit. There's no true inspiring dream and purpose and vision that we carry for ourselves if it's authentic, that isn't also about bringing something of goodness to the world. Because in our highest understanding of self, we realize we're not separate from the world. We're not separate from our source. So the deeper teaching of the Pisces archetype itself is the unification, the co-creative relationship with ourself and the source of meaning. So we infuse ourselves by becoming an agent of that. So Saturn and Pisces, bringing this back home, what is our work to do? What is meaningful? What brings meaning and purpose to our life? We draw upon those who have come before, and we recognize this takes work, it takes commitment, but life is designed for that. And that we're not just doing it for ourselves, we're doing it to share it, to be it, to emit it, to offer it. And this is the thing that I was thinking about when I saw the title that I created for this other effort towards live streaming several months ago. This is the difference between work and slavery. And I find this to be such a helpful pointer, another angle at the Saturn in Pisces. As I mentioned, there can be this dimension with Saturn in Pisces of meaninglessness, waking up every day, sort of being stuck in the sense of what's this for? And it doesn't matter whether we have a job and we're doing something or we're not. That depression and sense of discontent with the structural reality of our life can apply to any situation. And we should never judge ourselves relative to other people, because that emptiness and meaninglessness can be underneath the surface of a glamorous life just as much as a life in poverty. Really, at the core, we ask what's at the heart of our inner experience. Are we in touch with our true spiritual self? So it's never helpful to compare ourselves with other people, ever. In this sense of meaninglessness or emptiness, what happens is we just fall into the rut of essentially being a slave to our own conditioning. And it's very meaningful and useful to actually think of it in terms of the archetype of slavery. That which we don't understand ourselves to be free of, that which we don't know how to get out of, we're enslaved by. And so when we're embedded in a conditioning pattern, which we all are, it's going to point to where there's some part of our consciousness that is not awake, where we don't know our agency, and we're stuck in servitude. And what's interesting about slavery is it's comfortable. The inner slavery of the mind is a state of familiarity and comfort, albeit we're not necessarily happy, but it's a state of comfort. And the analogy that I want to give is that of the Israelites. So this first came up in my mind during Passover last year. The story is they were slaves in Egypt for 400 something years. So several generations were born into slavery. In Egypt, there was, apparently they had good food, they had their own homes, but there were slaves, meaning there were limitations. They didn't have freedom. They weren't equal citizens to that of the Egyptian people, but they were comfortable. And there was at first a lot of resistance to this Moses guy taking them out. Now they're traveling in the wilderness for 40 years and they're without ground. There's no ground. They don't have their homes. They don't have the reliability and the stability of their previous conditions. So to them, they're less comfortable and less secure than they were when they were slaves. In this analogy, they're traveling in the wilderness under the guidance of a prophet, right? In the moment, I don't know where you're taking me. I've never been there, some sort of future possibility. And it's uncomfortable. The nature of the wilderness, which is actually just desert, being the unknown. There's no direction. It's a very Piscean kind of experience. How do I map things? I'm far away from everything that I've known. And in the Bible, the Israelites continually complained. Take us back to Egypt. This is horrible. It was better over there. And Moses was pretty frustrated about that. It was a hard situation for him. He was really frustrated with how ungrateful everyone was. And what's interesting in this teaching is the word for work in Hebrew is avodah. And there's a song that you sing, Avadim hayinu lefaro b'Mitzrayim. We were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. Behotzienu, and God took us out, with a strong hand. The word for slave is avid, avadim. Slave and work share the same shoresh. They share the same root, right? Work is avodah. Slave is avidut. Slavery is avidut. To be a slave is to be an eved. To work is la'avod. So ayin, vet, dalid. In Hebrew, we have these root words, and then you add these different letters and vowels, and they can mean different things, but they share the same root essence. So we can learn a lot about a certain vibration by looking at its shoresh. I find it fascinating that the word for slavery and the word for work shares the same root, because work is also used in a different context. The word for prayer is also called avodah talev, the work of the heart. Work, from the point of view of avodah talev, is being in service to our co-creatorship, being in service to the way in which we are all an instrument of greater meaning and purpose, and we bring ourselves into alignment by following the path appointed to us, earnestly wanting our life to be meaningful and free. But to cultivate that level of freedom in our work is getting out of the avidut, the being an eved, of being a slave, which is secure, right? There's a stipend, there's some level of stability, but we're defined and conditioned by some kind of other master, and we can't serve two masters. So whether it's a good job that we hate, a structural reality in our life, or food addictions or substance addictions, or sustaining patterns with ourselves, be it with our habits or with our agreements that hurt us and other people, but that we seem to always fall into, that's the dimension of Saturn and Pisces that says we can build a sandcastle and believe ourselves to be stuck in it. But if we can realize it's actually just the slavery of our own mind, it's just a sandcastle. The discipleship and the cultivation of work from the point of view of avodah talev, work of the heart, is actually a prayerful relationship to, we can call it source, truth, love, but at the core, just that which we identify and recognize as being more meaningful than the world we know, more meaningful than our conditioning, more meaningful than the patterns that I've known that I seem to be stuck in. And I want to know that. I want to grow root in greater meaning. And so the practice becomes one of becoming more and more congruent in our behavior, in our thoughts, in our actions with this higher and greater meaning. And this final piece that I want to say about Saturn and Pisces, and I'll bring it a little bit back to the astrology, is this means forgiveness. Forgiveness fundamentally means we're looking at the conditioned reality and the momentum, the grove in the record within our consciousness that takes us back to the conditioning, and we forgive it. We forgive it. We don't meet it with judgment and harshness because that's its own patterning. We don't meet other people with harshness either because that's its own patterning. We learn to be forgiving and tolerant of other people's mistakes. We learn to become forgiving and tolerant of our own mistakes. And we learn to practice redirecting our attention towards what we're seeking to grow into, what we're seeking to cultivate. Because the harrowing, disillusioning reality with Saturn and Pisces is no one's gonna save us. The co-creative relationship between us and the divine is not, I'm gonna be in judgment and fear and separation and slavery, and you're gonna come in, something's gonna happen, and everything's gonna be better. We have to take full responsibility for our own thoughts. And it's hard to acknowledge that because where we're stuck in our own judgment or our own lower vibrational perceptions about ourselves or others or situations, as right, Saturn loves being right. So as right as we are, it's not going to take us where we want to go. And that's one of the hardest things with Saturn and Pisces, because really it's a matter of, do we want to give value to our rightness, or do we want to give value to our truth? Giving value to the truth means abstaining from our judgment, abstaining from being right. The rightness of Saturn is like the traditional man comes home from work and puts his hat on the hook and says, honey, I'm home. Where's my dinner? That archetype lives inside of each of us, that expects the world to be a certain way and feels irritated if it's not. So the whole world just sort of relaxes a little bit, and our rights and our wrongs and our shoulds and our have-tos relax a little bit. And we learn to cultivate a greater gentleness and permission and kindness for ourselves and for other people, to be this instrument, to give our lives to meaning and purpose, to share ourselves in love and beauty with the world in the way that is just right for us, means learning to think differently, learning to think in resonance with the love that we are. And that's another quality. Those who have come before us that have become successful in whatever they've decided or come to recognize as being meaningful and successful, whatever career or field or even spirituality, the one thing they demonstrate is they don't let themselves get stuck on the things that don't matter. They don't invest in that person and that person and that issue and that issue. They let it go. They let it go because they have something important to work on. And that's Saturn in Pisces, really being able to live in the world, to define how am I using it purposefully. Fundamentally, everything's going to become a hook. Bring us here, put your mind over here, think about this. And we can get so caught up, especially when it comes to, the collective is Pisces, all of us is Pisces, Saturn is government, rules, structures, the powers that be. We can see all kinds of suffering happening in the world. And there's a point at which fundamentally, this is not a statement contrary to grieving and to feeling things. That's a Cancer polarity to the Capricorn Saturn archetype. We can get lost in our moral outrage. We can get lost in our rights and what's right and what's just, but never turn deeper into who am I? What am I here to be? What is the highest expression of love that isn't just about my own joy, but allows me to be a conduit of meaning and purpose and joy? We can't suffer enough and be angry and stressed out enough to help the world. It's one of the most important Pisces lessons, especially with Saturn in there. Okay, so this is the emphasis, the pulse with Saturn stationing in Pisces. It's a very heightened quality. What I want to give attention to is what's going on right now. So I wish I can share the screen. I'll figure it out for the next live stream. Saturn is now going to move direct into the middle of Pisces. There are two things that I'm going to speak to here. One, Chiron is at 16 degrees Aries, stationing. It's going to station in a couple months. For the entirety of this month of November, Saturn is entering into a very tight semisquare with Chiron, right? This is 45 degrees. In fact, to be more accurate, this is actually 315 degrees, right? Saturn's slower than Chiron, so it's moving to complete a cycle. It's going to join Chiron much later, several years from now. But to keep it simple for all of us listening, 315 degrees, which is also a 45-degree separation. And this is the balsamic phase semisquare. The very nature of that, and I'm going to take this apart bit by bit, because this is very, very important. When we understand how significant Chiron is right now as an evolutionary player, understanding the Saturn-Chiron semisquare for this month is very, very essential. So I'm going to define this bit by bit and then bring it together. I've spoken a lot about Chiron in my most recent video. Chiron in Aries, in essence, is speaking to this initiatory process, and at its core, it's an individuation process, walking my own path, even if it means I'm doing something new. I'm going in a direction I've never been before. Am I strong enough? Can I make it? Will I make it? Can I go all the way? There's self-doubt, but what does it mean to take that self-doubt and say, I have to trust myself and trust the path? And it's the wound, it's the brokenness of fighting. It's the brokenness of fighting with one another and the pain that we carry relative to all the war making. There's a way of integrating the pain of war, the pain of separation, and saying, I'm going to do something new. That's Chiron. And we have a path with it moving towards a North Node where we are each called over the next several months to cultivate this courage and self-leadership to say, I'm going to do something new because I want to commit my life to something greater and more healing, not be in suffering, not be in strife anymore. There must be another way. And it takes that self-leadership. Okay, so Chiron and Aries keywords: tenderness, vulnerability, self-trust, individuation, self-leadership, medicine making, long-term path. The archetype of the semisquare is a refining and a focusing of energy. This is bringing forth the relationship between the long-term growth that we're committing to with Saturn stationing direct in Pisces, where we're called upon to actually acknowledge what is most meaningful and how can I take responsibility for that. Thus, the relationship between Saturn and Pisces in the semisquare to Aries says there's a path for us to walk that's just beginning to narrow in right now. It will narrow in even more when Saturn moves further into Pisces next year and forms a semi-sextile, 30 degrees. But the sesquiquadrate says defining, define. There needs to be a limitation and a structural limit and boundaries created. And this is going to be a big part of what we're giving attention to as Saturn tightens over the next few weeks with this Chiron semisquare. A tightening and a narrowing of options where it's, I can be doing this, I can be doing this, I can be making that choice, I can be making that choice. Well, how do I know which way to go? This reveals the confusion of different choices, different options. I want to grow, I want to commit, but I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to really set, or what path do I take? These are the kind of pieces that can emerge. So it can kind of feel like I feel weak and young and unsure of myself. Saturn and Pisces relative to Chiron and Aries. What if I make a mistake? What if I make this choice, but it's not the right choice, or I'm getting ahead of myself, okay? The key isn't just pushing through. It's looking at the archetype of confusion for what it is. So the archetype of confusion here within these signatures is its own issue, meaning the confusion isn't about working out the right solution and the wrong solution and seeing the two and weighing options. The confusion itself points to where there's a calling for correction, because the calling for correction isn't in focusing on the specific thing. I'm here to walk this path and do these things, and I'm going to commit to these particular decisions, because we can't know what we can't know. We can't fake it until we make it on the spiritual path. We can't pretend to be confident and certain about something that we're not confident and certain about. The relinquishment of confusion is the recognition that the mastery that we're cultivating is in our alignment, is in our relationship to the present moment. Our greater capacity to live with certainty and confidence in the work right now when things are challenging, when it's hard. And we hold that with devotion and humility. That signature really reminds me of that teaching, the meek shall inherit the earth, right? Where do we want to cower in fear? Where do we want to fawn? Where do we want to defense? Where do we want to get lost in the I don't know, or tell me what to do, where to go? To meet those moments where there is so much coming together very palpably, and recognize that our alignment, our agency, our clarity of being in the present moment is what, I don't know if you can hear the dog barking, but it's a part of the story right now, is what leads the way. I want to take a moment and just really ground myself in that vibration to offer clear words for it, and just let the dog be. In fact, let me bring the dog in. So 1 second. Esther, come here. Come inside. The foundation of that, come here, is trust. The foundation of that is a state where Saturn is like our parent. Saturn in Pisces is like the divine mother, father, The world is safe. There's guidance. There's direction. We're not lost. Like a child needs someone to hold their hand when they cross the street. We, at our deepest being, want to know there's someone there with us. There's something there with us. There's a nature to this existence that isn't abandoning us and leaving us out there alone. And sometimes, contrary to the seeming evidence of our experience, we're tempting to believe we're lost and there is no support, and it's scary. The deeper Piscean strengthening Saturn of our alignment and our agency and our direction is cultivating that faithfulness and that trust, which will express itself in defenselessness, in the energy of confidence. I don't know what I don't know, but I know right now. And what can I work on? What is in my realm of control? And we can really trust life to guide us forward. It's enough to cultivate our alignment and our agency. And then it's like, oh, the simplest thing. Here's a class I wanted to teach. Here's a conversation I have that just opens up this idea for a thing that I can do. Here's an opportunity that presents itself. Like the material, the ingredients arise on their own. We don't have to take this false responsibility to know it all and understand all of the pieces. That's like a child pretending to be an adult. We can't ever know enough or figure it all out. And this one more piece I want to really just connect with. And I share this often, and I really feel it in this moment. This dream message I received: we give thanks to Great Spirit to carry us through. We give thanks to Great Spirit that carries us through. That quality of thankfulness and gratitude. It's the acknowledgement that we are guided, we are carried through. And it's also that acknowledgement itself that carries us through. That brings us into direct relationship with a guidance that is here. That says, contrary to the conditions of my life, I know all is well. Isn't that the best thing we can ever give ourselves? I know I'm with all of my will, I'm giving myself to the knowing that all is well. Even though there's such a strong temptation to not know that, because that says for all to be well, I can't judge myself. I can't be judging you. I can't be judging the conditions. I can't be judging I'm making the wrong choice. I'm doing the wrong thing. All is well, which means I get to be right here and I get to return to the practice right here. And the discipleship is rich. I think about myself. There's so much I don't know. But the field of cultivation is so rich. And when my mind is in a good place, when I'm in right thinking, and sometimes stressful experiences are the gift of life to us, because they are strong enough to stress us, to push ourselves to choose. In this moment, I'm going to cultivate peace. I'm going to cultivate defenselessness and trust. Sometimes that's the gift of stress. And so much comes into picture. I keep on learning, when you combine strong Saturn energies with strong Aries energy, it really says, are we going to be militaristic and defensive and fearful? Or are we going to cultivate our strength in trusting the darkness of the path in front of us? So there's such prayerful reflection. And if you just study the archetype of the semisquare, that can be really helpful for you. One thing that my teacher, Jeff Green, taught about the balsamic phase semisquare is it's the closing of a cycle. All of the psychic energies going within into this deeper reflective place, looking upon the timeless and universal truths, right? What lasts, what doesn't last, what's fundamentally always true now, what's an illusion that comes and goes. Very often, what happens during this phase of development between two planets, both things will come to an end that maybe had a lot of meaning, especially Saturn, right? The sand castle that you built can begin to wind down. And things that want to prop up, that are going to be useful for a time, will then seemingly have a lot of importance. It's just for a time. Okay. The other thing that I want to speak to in closing the section on Saturn is its relationship to, and for those that are jumping in late, I don't have the chart up, its relationship to Neptune long-term. They're both in Pisces. Saturn's at the beginning of Pisces, Neptune's at the end. For the next couple of years, Saturn's completing this cycle with Neptune. There will be 2 more retrograde cycles before their absolute conjunction, okay? So there's a lot more to go on. But it's going to be this retrograde cycle, this direct cycle, where Saturn will just sort of touch upon its first conjunction within a 10-degree orb with Neptune. So this current direct motion of Saturn is going to introduce this very powerful upcoming Saturn-Neptune conjunction, which will really be the dominant theme in 2025 and 2026. So what that says too, Saturn is in a balsamic phase. It's beyond the semi-sextile. It's completing a whole cycle of development with Neptune. I'm not going to speak so in depth about it, but just wanting to touch upon an awareness of that so we can hold that in our understanding of the greater evolutionary unfolding. This is the closure of a cycle relative to all of the meaning, value, and purpose that we've given to all the things of our life, all the things of this world. And it emphasizes the existing Piscean dynamic. What's meaningful, what's meaningless? Fundamentally, in the end of the day, form and structure and time and space, mother, father, son, daughter, astrologer, boss, employer, employee, vegan, carnivore, working out, meditation practice, everything in our life is brought back to the question, how are we in relationship to it relative to our deepest spiritual purpose? What is the meaning that we're giving to every part of our own life? And if we have the curriculum to show up in a certain way, right? You have a certain role to play in society, with your job or in family. These are forms that for a time are manifesting. It still brings up that question. We are not defined by these forms. There's an emptiness and a spirituality at the heart, in the highest dimension of every form. The highest purpose of every form is the way in which it participates and allows for the movement of light and healing and forgiveness in this world. Beyond that, there's no greater long-term meaning to anything. So it comes back down to, how are we devoting? And I've shared this often, just this Saturn stationing direct and its movement towards Neptune over the next couple of years, but so highlighted with its present stationing this week and throughout this month. It really speaks this beautiful spiritual teaching around holiness. In Hebrew, to bring another Hebrew teaching, the word for holiness is kedusha, right? But also the word for discernment or to separate is lekadesh. Again, they share the same root. Kuf, lamed, kuf, dalid, shin, right? That which is to discern, to separate, and that which is holy, same thing, because holiness is. We give thanks to Great Spirit. That is carrying us through. Meaning is, and we give thanks to Great Spirit to carry us through. We are in conscious relationship. We choose to orient our attention to the fact of the holiness to make it real. That's where the deepest teaching of Pisces Neptune is. We're not saved from our ignorance. That was cool. We're not, that's bright. I don't know if you saw that. We're not saved from our ignorance. We elevate ourselves beyond our ignorance and we bring ourselves into conscious relationship with what is absolutely and always true right now, right here. And then we weigh every possible judgment or thought reaction relative to that. We never bypass. That's an issue, right? We meet the dark, we meet the confusion, we honor it. We don't allow ourselves to become identified with that. We elevate our thoughts to the truth. That's the discernment, lekadesh. We discern, I'm choosing to orient this moment to holiness, contrary to all of the seeming evidence that would say otherwise. And then we bring ourselves into resonance with the truth and it becomes available to us. It's like one of the biggest teachings, like with like the Piscean, help me, I'm lost, save me, I need some sort of salvation. It comes from our choice to see the world differently, to see this moment differently. Had this interesting experience today. I was actually feeling progressively sick all day. It's really not, that pre-sick feeling where your throat and you're achy. And the person that does care, that spends time with our kids on this day was sick. So I was on, and I was also taking care of another kid from a family friend. So I'm with 3 kids and, on all day on my feet, and really brought attention to joy and just like being with them. But there was like this sort of underlying like ache in my head and ache in my bones. It's funny, even just speaking it brings it back into my awareness. And a little bit of like, oh, how am I gonna, I have 2 sessions back to back and this broadcast that I committed to, oh man, should I cancel it? One session, technical difficulty, so we rescheduled. And actually I found that to be a gift. I took it as an opportunity to lie down, and I was bringing my attention to just focus on the service and the healing. And I was just ready to almost forget about the sickness, which is a thing that I can do. And we can all do that. But then there's a point where we also have to allow ourselves to rest. And so while I'm resting, I'm like, should I cancel the next session? Should I cancel the broadcast? Do I really just need to take a nap? And I was struggling with the guilt, right? I committed to it. I'm excited. People that appreciate my teachings are going to show up, and that means a lot to me. And I already put out an email out there to 2,400 people. I don't want to not show up. And so I felt guilt. I had to work through that, and I had to give myself a permission. If you want to cancel it so you can rest, you can. That was an important moment for me. If you want to cancel it, you're allowed to. You don't have to suffer and push yourself to bypass, drink more coffee in the middle of the afternoon when you're not feeling well, to just do what you said you're going to do. There's no, and what are you going to say? What's authentic if you're not really feeling good? So I gave myself that permission, and I just let that be. And I got liminal in a liminal space for a bit. And I woke up from that liminal space, and I felt ready for the next session. And I didn't really answer the question. I kind of just didn't have it. I just sort of gave myself that permission. And in that permission, it was well, I don't feel to cancel it, so I'm just going to go with this. That's what I got, right? It wasn't I'm going to do this, yay, motivation. It was more okay, I'm allowed to cancel if I want to, and I'm not getting that guidance, right? In that freedom and permission, I wasn't getting that, right? And that session healed me. It's the individual that I had the opportunity to work with, such a gem, such a gift. And the reflections and what she was sharing with me, and the reflections on my own soul path, and what I got to share as well. All the elements together in that session were just so healing. I felt a rejuvenation of spirit, so much joy and appreciation and recognition of the holy. And that itself just brought me into this deep sense of joy and excitement and certainty and confidence in this broadcast. I am doing it. I am doing this. For sure I'm doing this. And I mean, in my body, I feel so much better than I did. 1 second. I'm almost done with this, but I'm going to close the door because our dog is making a lot of noise. Hi, buddy. Hey, Vesta. Even when I was lying in bed thinking about I know healing is possible. I've had these experiences where the vibration changes, my thoughts change, and I bypass, the sickness, and it just goes away. And I've had many miracles like that where sickness just goes away in a moment, And I was trying to apply it, but it felt like spraying an odor on top of a fart. It's it wasn't making me feel better. It was just trying to make myself feel better. And I think one of the lessons here is we have to allow ourselves be where we are first and not judge it. There's a fundamental starting point, which is in order to actually restore our perception to holiness, the starting point is to not deny and avoid the not feeling good, the depression, the discontent, the unwellness, and to be humble about it, to let it be, and to not say, and this is how I'm supposed to feel, and this is what's supposed to happen. I'm supposed to be so well that I can, because that's not wellness, that's not love, that's actually very harsh. So the fundamental permission to say, I'm going to allow everything to be what it is. I'm going to allow everything to be at it, and I'm not going to have an answer for it. If what's healing and well is to rest and cancel, yes, right? And then on its own, through that permission, it's like something happens on its own. If I didn't even give myself that, I can easily imagine myself, and I've done this before, and it's not my ideal state to be in, where I show up for something and I'm not feeling fully there. And when I catch it, I'll stop and I'll go back within and I'll come back to where I am, which always means, oh, I'm here, I'm feeling this right now. Okay, what do I want to do about that? Do I want to stop, reschedule, or do I just need to acknowledge that I'm here so that I can stop pretending and feeling shame about it, right? So I allow it to be okay. That's the only point from which miracles can then begin to happen. There's this one experience at a rainbow gathering in, I think, 2006 or something. I used to go to the rainbow gatherings, and I was sick, didn't feel well. And I had a moment of like looking at a rainbow, and I was just like drawn, like inspired by it. I lost myself in the rainbow and the beauty of it for a moment. And then I was well. I was completely well. I have many stories about, in that nature. When our judgments are suspended, something else does it for us, There's a teaching in A Course in Miracles, like we aren't responsible for the miracle, we're responsible for the miracle mindedness. And that's Saturn and Pisces. Like our life can be the miraculous. It's really about cleansing and healing all of the shame and the judgments and the control and the slavery in our own mind that keeps us grudging away in patterns and conditionings that isn't loving. So yeah, this session that I did was so inspiring, and just reminds me of everything that I care to know about, everything that I want to remember. And I get to end this broadcast and then hang out with my daughters and do some fun Halloween stuff downtown, which is like so much fun. I've never done Halloween before. I also never did Christmas. Like I, grew up Jewish, but more fundamentally, Ari Moshe just never really felt interested in any of these cultural things. It was just never, I've always felt like the world's doing that, I'm not. And I've taken some sort of solace and serenity and peace and like nurturing in that aloneness. It's been very meaningful to me. But now it's like, my daughter wants to dress up and wants candy, So it's an exciting experience to have this new experience and to enjoy this playfulness, and to have this time being with you and sharing this broadcast further strengthens and reminds me of what's most important to me. So my friends, thank you so much for joining me in this broadcast. I was thinking I would talk about some of the Scorpio Taurus stuff, but that will have to be another video that I make, because there's a lot of strong Scorpio Taurus energy, in particular with Uranus. But it's been an hour, so we're just going to end it here gracefully. Much appreciation. By the way, I didn't look at the comments. Maybe I'll take a moment to see if there are any questions. I didn't actually look, but Q&A is invited here. Okay, Wako Rako. Hello. Let me read. Hello, sir. I have a problem I cannot find anywhere. Answer anywhere. In my natal chart, North Node exact same degree of Sun. Okay, so Sun, North Node conjunction. Oh, same exact degree, but 2 houses away. So they're not conjunct. So North Node, 7th, Sun, and 9th. So assuming the houses are relatively equal, that could be a sextile. I need your chart, of course, which we're not going to do to have full context, but to answer that question in general, any planet in the natal chart, and is this the nataling North Node? Yeah, your natal North Node. Okay. So obviously the transiting North Node at 24 degrees, your natal North Node at 24 degrees assigned. Any planet in the natal chart that's in any aspect to the North Node means that particular planetary function is an essential prayer for integrating our evolutionary growth and development in this life. The nature of that planet, the nature of the aspect, planetary ruler, will speak more to the context of that. But anything in relationship to the North Node is a green light to our ongoing evolutionary growth. Doesn't mean it's easy. Sextile is harmonious, right? Still, there's work to do, and that's as general as I can be. And this is why I give a lot of attention to the current Chiron North Node conjunction. But it's not just conjunctions. Any aspects to the nodes are essential players for integrating the evolutionary themes and needs of the time. Okay, let me see if there are any other questions. Okay, that is it. All right. Much love to you all. Thank you so much for joining me.